The rankings are obviously what law school admissions is all about, at least, and for the admission officers sometimes, right? Like, did you ever notice at NYU where you've heard through the grapevine about the impact of the rankings on admissions decisions?
I don't know if how much I can really say about this, but I do think certain law schools do care a lot about them. And then other law schools that, I had colleagues that didn't seem to care about them as much. It kind of depends. Like, certainly they have so much influence on like where students apply, but I don't think a place like Yale, for example, is going to care a lot about the U.S. News rankings. Like, I honestly don't think that's a huge part of their strategy. But certainly for other schools, like, it's a big deal, and trying to move up in the rankings is really important to them. But yeah, in terms of strategy, I think for the top schools, like, certainly, there is a lot of attention to the average of the class, right? And so they have to report these to US News, and they also have the required, ABA reports, every year that, give a lot of data about the student profile. But I think it just really depends on the individual school, how much they emphasize it, whether, it's the dean of the school or, I think at the end of the day, some schools are going to be more regional and it's not going to be as big of a deal to them.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, certainly for the top 5, whether they're ranked 4 or 5 one year, everyone knows they're a great school. And these could be tiny, minute differences that are really unimportant, like the size, number of books in the library or something like that, right?
Yes.
But one thing I think of with the top schools, though, is that even if they're not stressing over their exact placement in the rankings, they would still be thinking, well, am I admitting someone who has no LSAT score and it's not going to impact the rankings in any way, versus someone who may have a score that's at or slightly above the median, which could help potentially raise the school's ranking, of course, if there were many students in aggregate. So I'm still thinking it conveys a certain degree of seriousness on the part of the applicant as well as potential benefit to the school.
Exactly. So, I mean, the GRE isn't a data point yet for US News in the law school rankings. So I just don't think that we can really say what the impact is. But then if they started including it, certainly I think the GRE scores would have to be pretty comparable to the LSAT in terms of the percentile rankings. And I did hear rumblings, that they are kind of looking at the GRE in a similar way, like what percentile is that student among the other test takers.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing about the two different exams is that it's significantly easier to get a 95th or 97th or 99th percentile score on the GRE than on the LSAT, just because they're very different pools of test takers.
Completely agree, because I took both tests, and in all honesty, I found the GRE much easier for me. But, I was pretty familiar with the SAT, and reading comprehension was easily my best section, whereas, the LSAT certainly is going to do a lot more with logical reasoning, and, those are skills that are super important to lawyers down the road.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the reason it's considered valid and reliable is because it's a good predictor of first-year law school grades. And from everything I've seen, they haven't really shown the same for the GRE quite as definitively.
Yes, I know there are a bunch of studies being thrown out there, but at the end of the day, I do feel that LSAT is more predictive of the first-year law school grades. But it doesn't 100% correlate, of course. There is a correlation also with your GPA in undergrad, but not 100%. Nowhere close. So I think it was always a little bit of a surprise, like who ended up ranked top in the class each year based on like what we saw with their LSAT and their grades, because it wasn't 100%, correlated for sure.
No, for sure. There are so many other things in terms of your work ethic, other obligations, and then just the competition within your class and how you adjust to law school. A lot of factors there.